I'm here to reassure you because I recognize that there is a collective anxiety around at the moment, just 11 days out of this general election. And you feel it, and I feel it, and people feel it. And it's this miscommunication, this dichotomy between the fact that Donald Trump as a autocrat, as a despot, as an authoritarian and dictator is neck and neck with a lifetime law enforcer and prosecutor, district attorney and vice president, a female who cares for women and their right to choose, who cares for minorities, who cares for immigrants, who actually cares. And so there does seem to be this discrepancy why they are neck and neck in the polls. And I've made a previous video about my opinion about the polls, and I encourage you to go look at that. But I want to start by putting your mind at rest and letting you know that I just think it's going to work out okay. Whilst we recognize the threat that Donald Trump poses, and while we understand that a vote for him is a vote to go back, not just to 2016, but back to the Middle Ages, effectively, with the way society operates, and the white supremacy, and the racial segregation, and the hatred and vitriol towards minority groups and LGBTQ plus community. They're not hiding these facts, and if you were to read Project 2025 by the Heritage Foundation, you will see that these are the plans that Donald Trump really has to fall back on. I mean, he doesn't have any other policy plans other than Project 2025, and whilst he might pretend to kind of say, I don't know anything about it, trust me, the people behind it, Kevin Roberts and his group, they are firmly of the opinion that this is Donald Trump's policy manifesto. So, The Handmaid's Tale is what America will look like under a future Trump presidency. Democrats and progressives and minority groups and feminists and women are not going to go quietly. There will be mass protests. There will be significant pushback. Don't think that people are just going to go quietly, and maybe Donald Trump hasn't worked this out yet. You know, he thinks that he can dominate like Xi Jinping does in China or Vladimir Putin does in Russia without any pushback because there will be arrests and dissenting voices will be silenced. It doesn't work like that in America, not with our protected First Amendment, our right to protest, our right to free speech. And so this wouldn't end well for Donald Trump if he was to enact those things. There would be a significant movement that would probably result in some kind of constitutional crisis. But the main point I want to make, and where to put your mind at rest, is that the vote on the 5th of November will, sure, have probably a larger number of people voting from all sides. I have no doubt that people will be getting out the vote. That has been the message from both parties. What you will see is a larger number of people voting to maintain the institutions and protections that the United States offers. And the only person that is advocating for those things is Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and the Democrats. And so they might not say it out loud, but you're going to get an awful lot of Republicans voting for the Democrats just this once. They might not be telling people about it. This is why they don't show up in polls, because they're not going to go public about what they feel they have to do to protect their country. So those people I have a lot of trust in. And, you know, an awful lot of senior Republicans and senior former Trump administration officials are all coming out in these last couple of weeks and basically saying that Trump is not to be trusted with the presidency. And we're going to hear that more and more. And as that happens, Trump becomes more unhinged. And every article like that, he gets more upset and angry. And so he dials up the fascism, talking about turning the military on American citizens or women being punished for having abortions. I mean, that is who Trump is. He's always been that guy. But he's on the back foot now, on the run from the US authorities. I mean, all of these legal cases are the United States versus Donald Trump. He is literally an enemy of the nation. And somehow he is allowed to run for president. But I also want you to think about the fact that Trump hasn't won anything since 2016. He is a loser in the political arena. And 2016 aside, remember, people were voting for him because he was the guy off The Apprentice. At that point, they didn't know about what was to come. January 6th hadn't happened. him trying to overturn a legitimate election hadn't happened, threatening Mike Pence's life and Nancy Pelosi's life and the riot on the Capitol building. And I'll go with you, and if you don't fight, you're not going to have a country anymore, and you've got to fight like hell, and Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. None of that had happened in 2016. And he lost in 2020, and that stuff still hadn't happened. That stuff happened in January 2021. And in that time, Trump has become more extreme. He's also become more demented and more compromised. And the two impeachments, don't forget those. They might not have been ratified or criminalized in the Senate, but he was still impeached twice. The first time for extorting Ukraine, and the second time for the coup of January 6th. And the coup, remember, was not just the riot, it was a plan designed to switch out the electors with fake electors and have Mike Pence call the election for Donald Trump. That stuff hadn't happened in the last election. People are not going to vote for a presidential candidate who tried to overthrow a legitimate U.S. general election. They're just not. And then, of course, we have the 34 felony counts and the 4 indictments, and we have all the other crimes and misdemeanors that Donald Trump is being held accountable for. Admittedly, he's on the run. Admittedly, he's been given some immunity from the Supreme Court, but his case is coming up in a matter of weeks. His sentencing is coming up shortly after the election. Donald Trump is a criminal. He's a convicted felon. That hadn't happened last time either. So between the last election of 2020 and now, November 2024, so much stuff has happened. Donald Trump has been exposed for being a lifelong criminal. America is not going to vote for a criminal. And so while the polls might say one thing, it's designed to really push us to the limit with our anxieties and our fears, but that's also going to push more people to come out and vote. The closer that race gets, the fewer people are going to stay home this election. And as we know, when polled nationally, America is a forward-thinking, progressive, need I say, liberal country. It is not this far-right Christian nationalist minority group that Donald Trump heads. Trump's people make an awful lot of noise, but they are not the majority. Remember, the American people, they don't really like convicted felons. They don't really like business fraudsters. They don't really care for adjudicated rapists. That is not a reason to vote for somebody. So with all of Donald Trump's crimes on show, the ones that may have affected you personally or the ones that have affected others and society as a whole, Trump might be the noisiest candidate, but he's not a winning candidate. I'm Anthony Davis. You can catch me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel and podcast, on Wednesdays co-hosting Uncovered, and on Sunday on The Weekend Show with Midas Touch.